I can't. It's just I might forget, so I would prefer to.
Okay, let's call the February 21st, 2018 Planning Commission meeting to order. Let's do our Pledge of Allegiance. Gina Skelock, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you very much. And that leads us to our Planning Director's report.
Roll call.
Oh, sorry, roll call.
Let's see who's here first.
Details.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Fonda-Bernardo?
Here.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Here.
Commissioner Lambert?
Here.
Commissioner McKinnon?
Present.
Commissioner Perry?
Here.
Chair Fresco?
Here.
Good evening, Commission. Coming up for your agendas in March, on March 7th, 2929 Pico, which is a development review permit for a commercial office building. And also on the same agenda, 401 Ocean Avenue. And then on March 17th is when we're planning to have the Planning Commission retreat, which we're going to discuss later tonight. March 21st, the land use plan draft discussion, and also a presentation on the 17th Street cycle track. And then on April 4th, we have an appeal at 470 19th Street, which is a fence wall hedge modification that was appealed to the Planning Commission. Coming up at City Council next Tuesday is the Mobility Strategic Goal and Vision Zero study session. And on that same agenda, also the future of Big Blue Bus. So that's quite a heavy mobility discussion. That staff report will be out by the end of the day tomorrow. Actually, I think both those. So if you're interested, you should take a look at those. And then on March 27th, we have the appeal of 2309 Lincoln, which is a project the Commission reviewed, last month, I guess. And so I think, as you know, that project was appealed, now going to City Council. That concludes my report. One of the things we're going to start doing at the beginning of all of these meetings is reading some instructions on emergency exiting in the event of an emergency, so I'm going to run through that. So in the event of an emergency, please exit the council chambers either by the main doors and proceed down the hall, down the stairs, out the front doors, and wait for an all clear at the far end of the fountain by Main Street. And then as an alternative exit is through the east door by the dais and down the fire escape stairs. So that's that door there. So that's it. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I have a question.
Question.
We were talking before the meeting about you're doing a briefing or a study session or whatever with the City Council on the Housing Accountability Act. did you say, did I get that right? Or SB 167 or both? Or?
No, we're preparing a council information item, so it'll
Okay.
be a written info item to
I got it.
council, summarizing the 2017 housing package and
Cool.
an assessment of how it impacts Santa Monica.
Can we get a copy of that? Is
Yes,
that-
of course. Yeah, it'll be published on the website, and we'd be happy to provide
Okay,
it to the
thank you.
commission when it's ready.
Beautiful. Any other questions? All right, we have no minutes, so we have 3 statements of official action on our agenda.
Moved.
Is there a second? I have one little teeny tiny note on 7C. On the,
So I move A and D on the consent calendar, and then the other one gets removed.
second. On 7C, in the request, third line up from the bottom, it says, includes adjusting plans for some units with proposed interior bedrooms. I wanted to remove the word some, so that any unit that it's possible to get a window in without violating the fire code will get a window, and not just some units.
That's what we talked about.
Right. So I felt the word some didn't say what we were asking.
It's literally some units, but it was referring to those units in totality.
Right, I
based
just,
on
the way it
right.
reads, it's just a little
I think we get it.
usage. So do you want to add that to your motion, and then we can vote with changes?
I guess so.
7A and B plus C with change.
Well, I think we need to establish, is everyone else all right with the changes?
Is everyone all right with the change? Okay,
Okay, I'll move that then.
And I'll second it.
all right. So, so we have a motion to approve A, B, and C with a change. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? And one abstention?
Yes.
For only one or all 3? For C. Okay. Beautifully done.
Chair, I move the consent calendar on 8A and 8B.
I'll second.
Oh, wait.
Nope.
Which one is that?
8A, 8B.
Okay. Good job. Okay,
Thank
there was
you.
a second. Is there any discussion on that?
I just want to say I'm delighted about the Ocean Park project.
It's consent, Chair.
Okay. All right, let's vote.
All those in favour?
Just a voice vote? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. So that brings us to item 9A, which is 1128 Ocean Park Boulevard, an appeal of a zoning Yes?
I mean, you can announce it, but
Yes, let me just announce it, then we'll know what you're talking about. An appeal of the zoning administrator's denial of a minor use permit to allow a new wireless telecommunications facility. Jason?
yeah, I live within 500 feet of this project, so I'll need to recuse myself.
Okay, thank
It's a
you.
very early night, Commissioner. Thank you for coming.
What did you say?
No, he's not coming back.
No way. Just when we talk about the
Okay.
retreat.
So are there any ex parte communications from anybody here? No? Jennifer?
I just wanted to bring up, I received an email from somebody a homeowner nearby, named Ralph Metcher, and he sent the email to my personal email address, but it was also copied to staff, so staff has the email. The email was in support of the staff recommendation.
And I received an email from Bruria and Adam Finkel, and again, in support of the staff recommendation.
I just wanted to disclose that while I don't live near the tower and I am not a T-Mobile customer, I do live pretty much smack dab in the middle of the service area that is possibly affected by this. I've been advised that it's not really a conflict, but I just wanted to put that out there. Anything else? All right. Staff, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. I am Michael Roque, Associate Planner of the City Planning Division, and the project before you tonight is an actual appeal of a minor use permit requesting a new wireless telecommunications facility located at 1128 Ocean Park Boulevard. The subject site is approximately 30,000 square feet in size and is located along Ocean Park between Euclid and 11th Street in the R3 zone, and the existing use is a 43-unit, three-story apartment building. This is a bird's eye view of the subject site and how it relates in context, in like actual context with the streetscape. The area is made up of mostly similar multi-family residential uses along Ocean Park with adjacent R1 zoning located immediately to the north and the south of the subject site. The site previously requested a use permit for a new wireless facility to be located on the rooftop back in 2008, and the use permit was denied by the zoning administrator and subsequently appealed by the applicant, in which the appeal was upheld by the Planning Commission in 2010. The applicant then filed a new MUP back on April of 2017 to once again allow for a new wireless facility, which was then once again denied by the ZA on November 28th, 2017, and then subsequently appealed by the applicant. The actual proposed project consists of proposing 3 new antenna sectors, A, B, and C, as shown here, and associated equipment area on the rooftop of the existing 3-story apartment building. The antennas and the equipment area will be contained within an approximate 3-foot high FRP faux mansard roof extension. Sectors A and C are located along the front of the building, adjacent to Ocean Park, which is shown up here. And then Sector B is located at the southwest rear corner, adjacent to the alley, with the equipment lease area located at the center of the rooftop area. The actual proposed use is subject to approval of an MUP within the subject zone, because it does not comply with Santa Monica Municipal Code Section 932-060A1, in which no commercial antenna shall be located in a residential zone. In order for the Planning Commission to amend this regulation, it must be able to determine that the presence of topographical conditions, nearby tall structures, or other factors that unreasonably obstruct or would interfere with the effective wireless transmission does indeed exist, and that it is compatible with the neighborhood. The Telecommunications Act provides that a locality's denial of a wireless facility must not prohibit personal wireless services. A locality may violate the Telecom Act if it denies a wireless provider from closing a significant gap in their service coverage. The Act involves a 2-part analysis. First part is whether the carrier has provided proper basis for showing the actual gap in its service coverage. If the carrier is able to prove there is one, then the analysis turns to the second part, which is whether the proposed method of closing the actual gap is by the least intrusive means to actually do so. Based on both the written and the oral testimony presented at the zoning administrator hearing on November 28, 2017, the ZA denied the minor use permit based on the following. The applicant did not adequately demonstrate an existing significant gap in coverage, nor would the actual denial prohibit T-Mobile mobile from actually providing adequate service within the area, and that the applicant did not demonstrate that they had reasonably sought or that they had adequately considered less intrusive alternative sites in the nearby commercial lake areas, such as the NC Zone 2.5 blocks east of the proposed site or within the public right of way. Further findings supporting the denial are found in Attachment C of the staff report. The appellant's statements explaining the reasons for the appeal are summarized in 2 points. The propagation maps provided show that the existing sites are indeed overloaded and that they need a new facility to offload the current sites to keep up with the huge increase in the demand for data within the area, and that the NC zone just east of the site and the general commercial zone south of the site were actually too far away to offload service within Lincoln, being at a lower elevation of approximately 40 feet, that the site alternatives would not be an optimum solution, and that the light poles or utility poles would not be appropriate because this requires small cell deployment, which they claim is not sufficient for this area. As stated previously in the Telecom Act, a locality's denial of a wireless permit cannot exclude or have the effect of excluding service. Key to this finding is for the applicant to demonstrate that there is a significant gap in service and that the locality's denial of the permit would not prohibit service. Staff feels the appellant has failed to demonstrate this in the following ways: the lack of quantifiable information to assess of poor service in the actual coverage area, and the lack of quantifiable information to assess the claim that the proposed site would achieve the majority of the coverage area. Both staff and the city telecom consultant has reviewed the appellant's coverage area, which is shown by the red outlined area here. And based on the proposed antenna like orientations, which are directed to the west, northwest, and south, the actual coverage will likely be substantially less than the boundaries that were like indicated on the appeal form, especially to the northeast and to the east of the site, which is highlighted in the orange area up here. As a result, staff is unable to actually substantiate the appellant's claims of a significant gap or that the proposed site would address the gap because neither claim is supported by quantifiable evidence. Further, the existing coverage map as shown here also fails to prove that a significant gap exists based on the lack of quantifiable information to assess claims that the proposed site would improve customer experience because the existing sites are overloaded, and that the maps appear to show that there is sufficient existing coverage, contradicting the appellant's claim of a significant gap. Also, there is no documentation provided that actually describes any technical deficiency or coverage or coverage area. The map appears to be an actual projection of existing signal strength in a large portion of Santa Monica, including around the actual proposed site, without any signal contribution from the actual proposed site. Thus, the map does not actually prove that there is no portion of the area displayed that actually lacks existing LTE coverage. If a significant gap has been proven or established, then the second part of the test is to assess whether the appellant has actually proposed the least intrusive means to address that gap. The appellant states that the neighborhood commercial district 2.5 blocks east of the project site was not considered for this site because it's located beyond the effective coverage areas and offloading of service from other existing sites, even though its intended coverage lies within this area and appears to contradict their actual coverage needs. Also, the appellant explored 2 sites within the GC zone to the south of the actual project site along Lincoln. These alternatives were reviewed by both staff and the city's telecom consultant, and it was determined that both of the locations failed to provide a meaningful comparative analysis due to lack of factual evidence and therefore unable to conclude that the sites are technically infeasible. Further, while the appellant claims this is not an optimum solution, the Telecom Act does not require the city to allow a carrier optimum coverage. Lastly, the appellant may, by state law, propose sites within the right-of-way. The appellant already uses small cells in the neighborhood, and they are shown in the appellant's appeal exhibits. So there is no evidence to actually support the appellant's claim that small cells are not viable in this area. Based on the evidence and analysis provided, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission uphold the zoning administrator's determination of the minor use permit and deny the requested appeal based on the required findings. The actual proposed use is not compatible with any of the land uses presently on the subject parcel. The proposed use is not compatible with existing and permissible land uses within the area, and the physical location or placement of the use on the site is not compatible with and does not relate harmoniously to the surrounding neighborhood. For further findings supporting the upholding of the actual denial are found in attachment B of the staff report. Public notices were sent out to property owners within a 750-foot radius, and staff received 17 comments in opposition of the subject request. And this will conclude staff's presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? I actually have one question, which may just show how little I understand telecommunications. But I understood that that cell companies don't exclusively provide all of the service towers and for their own service, that there's a certain shared use of equipment to get the data across and into all the areas. So are these maps that they showed us that have the little spots where they show the transmitters, are they only T-Mobile's transmitters, or are there other transmitters that are owned by other companies that are also providing service?
Correct. Yeah. So these are only going to be for T-Mobile, like only. They're not going to provide any other carriers because it would sort of overlap within their maps. So I don't think the data would come out correctly. So this is only for T-Mobile only. So the existing sites that you see are all active T-Mobile sites only.
So T-Mobile customers for this kind of data transmission don't share other.
That I'm not 100%. I don't know how the carriers provide. I don't know if they do share networks or data or they cross over lines. I probably would defer that to maybe our telecom consultant who's actually here, Dr. Kramer, who can probably better answer that.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll save that for after. Go ahead.
So I have a question, not of you, Michael, but of the consultant then, if he's here.
Yep.
So it is suggested by T-Mobile that two things: that any other site is not optimal or optimum, and second, that small cells won't work because they need to be in high traffic areas. I assume what they mean is small cells will work, they would just prefer to not put them in these areas. Is that correct?
You're absolutely correct.
So that's a cost issue more than a service issue.
That's right, and it's important to understand that under the Telecom Act, we're required to allow them to close gaps in their coverage, but there's nothing in the law or in court decisions that requires us to give them A, optimal coverage, or B, the least expensive solution. It's the least intrusive means.
And they could place it somewhere else in Santa Monica and still get coverage.
They have a variety of other options as to how to provide coverage in the area that they're seeking to provide coverage.
I got the sense in reading your report that you couldn't understand the material they supplied to us.
I frankly couldn't understand why it was important to know where T-Mobile's stores were. I frankly was surprised that they provided references to the personal coverage check map, which is never done. And yet, when you go to the personal coverage check map, you find the banner that says this is verified by customer data. The appeal itself, as a radio frequency engineer and as an attorney, did not substantiate any of the basic claims.
Extremely.
That's why it took so much time just to go through each and every exhibit to describe what it was and how it didn't really fit into this appeal process.
You struck me as very diplomatic in both those comments and these comments here this evening. Thank you. We may ask again.
Thank you very much.
Can you just try to straighten me out in my wandering? And
Yes.
Thank you.
In terms of networks, each company has its own network. They will physically share sites, but not transmitters. Outside of an area, a metropolitan area, it may be that a subscriber for Verizon will roam on another carrier's network. That's not the case here because this is a metropolitan area. So 100% for Santa Monica, and the information that was presented, those are T-Mobile sites and T-Mobile sites only. And there's no roaming on other networks. In an
So it's
area
really
like this.
not relevant where other networks have their equipment.
That's correct.
What I was. Okay,
May I ask a
thank you.
follow-up question then?
Yes.
So my understanding of the cell network is that the cells expand and shrink depending on demand at any given time, or the coverage. And when they say this is the optimal place, there are many other places that could cover that shrinkage at key moments when there's a lot of demand. Is that a reasonable assessment? And they could be on Lincoln, for example.
That's correct. In terms of shrinkage,
I mean the
se,
coverage.
Yeah, the coverage doesn't actually contract and expand very much. They actually do occasionally change the coverage, primarily during traffic times, high traffic times. But in terms of a substantial shrinkage, that's not how these networks are designed. They're designed to have a certain amount of overlap to the next adjacent site, so that as you travel from this cell to this cell, there's a handoff. So they pretty much keep the same handoff range.
It's striking how many calls fall out or are unacceptable, then, isn't it?
It
That's
is
unanswerable,
a
really.
function of how many cell phones they sell versus how much network they build. And no cell phone company builds a network to handle all of the calls from all the subscribers. They just don't do that. And the reason they don't do it is for the same reason why during an earthquake, if you pick up a Frontier telephone, formerly Verizon, you won't likely get a dial tone because they plan for an average amount of use, not the peak use. It's the same thing with the cell phone networks.
So what I didn't get from your report was the sense that T-Mobile had established that average usage had gone up so significantly they needed to plug this gap at this time.
The report was devoid of any factual information that would have even alluded to that. They're simply bare claims, not substantiated, of some perception of some issue that wasn't quantified. And from I've been working with the city now for almost 25 years, advising the city on wireless matters. You don't do good planning on claims. You do it on objective data.
Thank you.
All
I'll be
right.
here.
Thank you very, very much. We're going to hear from the public now. Oh, the applicant. Sorry. I do that sometimes. It was a mistake, not a slight.
Good evening, commissioners and city staff. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our application tonight. I have some information that I'd like to hand out to everybody.
No,
To the
over there.
secretary, please. She's the applicant. She hasn't told us who she is.
Oh, okay. I thought you knew.
My name is Amy Weeks, and I'm with T-Mobile. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So once the information is handed out, I will go over some of this information that I have for you. I wanted to just clarify what our the purpose of our application. So I wanted to clarify that the purpose of our wireless facility at this location is to provide capacity offload. We're not looking to provide additional coverage in this area. We're looking to offload our existing facilities that are overloaded with high traffic. So that is the purpose of this application and this submittal. So if you can look at the first page that I provided, this is our basically our service area that we are trying to cover with this the facility at 1128. So that service area is outlined in that black line, and this map is what we call our high traffic map. So this high traffic map shows you that there is high traffic in those dark red areas along Pico, along Ocean Park, and along Lincoln. There is also some sprinkled high traffic area in the residential areas. We also have some medium traffic in those residential areas as well, which is part of our service area that we are looking to cover. To clarify our existing sites that we have, the sites that are in circles, those are DAS sites. So those are what we call in-building DAS solutions. They are not typically the type of site that provides outdoor coverage. So those are the indoor solutions. The other facilities that are shown on this map, those are our outdoor solutions. So those are the same type of site that we're proposing at 1128. If you go to the next page, this shows you, this will show you the capacity offload service area that we are trying to cover with the proposed candidate 1128. As you can see, it provides offload of along Lincoln. It also provides offload in those residential areas outside of Lincoln and along Ocean Park. This candidate 1128 will provide us 73% of our capacity offload in this service area. It will also provide 75% of our traffic offload. So that's that high traffic that I was discussing earlier. If you can go to the next page. The next page, this is an example of one of those commercial properties off of Lincoln. So as you can see, that area is shrunk down, and it is not as great of a benefit as 1128. So you can see that that area is shrunk down, and it is providing a little bit of offload of traffic along Lincoln, and then a little bit of offload of those residential areas. This particular location provides 32% service area and 41% of that high traffic that we're trying to offload. The next page is another example of another commercial property off of Lincoln. Again, this is a smaller service area that is covered by this candidate. So this will provide 48% of our service area and 52% of our traffic that we are trying to offload. Again, this covers most of Lincoln Boulevard and a very small amount of those residential areas. And then the next page is another example of a commercial property. This is in the NC commercial area, which is northeast of where our proposed facility is right now. So this is another coverage area. As you can see, this provides capacity offload in a completely different area than what we are targeting. This would provide 21% of our service area and 7% of that high traffic that we are trying to offload. If you turn to the next page, this is an example of another capacity offload that we are trying to achieve. This shows you our low performance that we have in building in this area. The maps that I was showing you previously, those cover what were our high traffic areas. This shows you those red areas that you can see, those are our in-building performance. So those are low performance and in-building solutions. So we are looking, the site that we are proposing will provide not only traffic offload of our existing sites, it'll also provide offload of this in-building performance that we are trying to achieve. If you turn to the next page, this will show you the in-building performance that we could achieve with the current candidate at 1128. As you can see, it is covering a lot of that red area. The next page is an example of one of those commercial properties off of Lincoln. As you can see, it does not cover as much of that red in-building performance area. Same with the next page, that is the second commercial candidate that we proposed, and that covers very little of that in-building performance area. And then lastly is that commercial property that is at the northeast end of our proposed area, and that is covering almost none of our in-building performance that we are trying to achieve. As a comment to the small cell discussion or claim that you guys were discussing, it is not that this small cell will not provide us any kind of offload in this area. Small cell is mainly used to offload high traffic in the outdoor areas. It does not provide us or assist us with our in-building performance, which is two things that we are trying to achieve here. We are trying to achieve the offload of that high traffic area in those first maps that I showed you. In addition, we are trying to increase our in-building performance in those other maps that I was showing you. And so with this type of facility, this gives us those two options. With the small cell option, it gives us offload of our outdoor high traffic. It doesn't assist us with that in-building traffic. Is there any questions on the information I just provided?
So small cells have no impact whatsoever on in-building performance?
I wouldn't say no impact whatsoever, but its main purpose is to provide capacity offload in those outdoor areas.
Because it does seem this in-building performance problem is in the area between, say, 4th and about 6th Street in the Ocean Park area, which is a natural valley between two kind of slightly peaky things. Is there no other solution that you could target into that area?
Again, with this type of facility that we're proposing, which we call a macro site, this type of facility assists us with that in-building coverage. The other solution that we have is a DAS solution, which is usually used for large buildings, arenas, stadiums, that type of thing is where we propose our DAS systems.
So that didn't quite answer the question. My question was, is there no other solution? There appears to be another solution from what you just said.
Another solution would be a DAS solution, but that is used for our larger venues, like a stadium, something like that. We wouldn't put that inside a small commercial building.
So from what you're saying and what the telecommunications consultant was saying, there are a range of solutions that are available. Your company's just choosing not to deploy them at this time in Santa Monica.
So we are looking to achieve two different solutions here. As I mentioned before, the two solutions that we're looking to achieve is the high traffic offload of our existing sites in addition to that in-building coverage. And that is achievable with this type of macro site.
It is, but
yes.
I'm trying to get to the point that it's also achievable in some other way.
It is, but it will not help us with that outdoor high traffic area. So we would have to do two separate solutions.
Oh, okay. So why can't you do that?
Again, we would usually do a DAS system in a large venue. We wouldn't do it in a small building.
So I understand the word usually. I'm asking the question specifically. Why couldn't you do that here at this time to solve that problem?
Because we don't have that type of building available for us to provide that indoor solution, a DAS indoor solution.
Right, but you could use two dissimilar solutions in different places to target different problems.
We could, yes.
Thank you. I'll reserve my questions at the moment.
I would like to know your thinking about how the general commercial area on Ocean Park, 16th, actually you could have put it at 17th, which is the 16th to 18th, because that's a substantially higher elevation than the building you're proposing.
Right.
And why it won't work there is confusing to me. I know there are no three-story buildings there, but the elevation difference should make up for that.
It's just the distance away from the service area that we are trying to achieve. So when you go farther away from the service area, then we have issues with the trees, with other buildings providing causing interference with our signal.
Well, what's interesting is 16th on the northwest side of 16th and Ocean Park, 17th and Ocean Park. It's all open space. I mean, it's basically a school yard. So it seems like that would be really ideal from the standpoint of your transmission. There are no buildings there.
Right. It's just the distance that's the issue. It's so far away from the service area that we're trying to achieve. And as you can see that on the map that I provided, it was the last example. You can see that here, that the coverage area that or the service area we're trying to achieve is down here, and this only provides us this area. And it's because of that distance.
It's 5 blocks.
Right.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question. So the consultant for the city, who's been, as he says, doing this for 25 years and was here on a previous occasion, I think you were also here that night, says that there are almost no facts associated with your appeal. How do you respond to his assertion?
Well, these are all generated from our networks, our network. So all of this information, all of these maps are generated from our network.
Wouldn't it have been a good idea to give him the numbers and let him make an assessment that we could have then made a judgment on, so your claim and his professional judgment based on your numbers?
What numbers are you asking for?
Well, demand. You're suggesting that you need this to tackle handoffs, low performances. We could go on like this. Wouldn't that have been a useful thing? And then he wouldn't be telling us there's no information, no data. This is not a good appeal.
Yeah, the information I have is the information I'm providing you.
Thank you.
The information that you provided us tonight, these maps are not the same maps that we received in your...
Right.
So, Mike, I have a question for the city attorney. Are there any restrictions for the commission? I know we're hearing this de novo, but are there any restrictions on how we can consider this new information tonight? She just said that this was not provided to us previously, hasn't been analyzed by the city, and the public hasn't seen it.
Well, you can do exactly that. You can say that it wasn't analyzed, and therefore you're either not confident in the validity of the information, or you could solicit, have him look at it and give his opinion on what he thinks about these. If he can, if he thinks that he needs more time, then that would be something to consider as well. So you can consider all of that as part of your decision-making process.
Thanks.
Amy? Hi. My understanding is that our zoning code says that we're not allowed, the zoning code doesn't allow cellular towers in residential zones. And that the only reason that we're kind of considering putting the tower in a residential zone is because of the Telecommunications Act, right? Which says that we can't deny a wireless provider from closing a significant gap in that provider's service coverage. So I hear you saying that the two goals of your proposal are about capacity offload and in-building coverage, and to me that doesn't sound like a gap. So maybe you can help connect those dots for me.
Exactly. So like I said earlier, I wanted to clarify the purpose of this. The purpose of our proposal was not for closing a gap in coverage. It was for capacity offload. So it is to offload those existing sites that provide that coverage. So we're offloading existing sites because we have a large number of subscribers in this area, and because there's a lot of high traffic in this area. So we're looking to offload that high traffic. If we are not successful in offloading that high traffic, then we experience poor customer service, dropped calls, customers are not able to stream on their phones, they're not able to use their data service, Those are the issues that we have when we're not able to offload those overloaded sites.
I sympathize with your customers, right? Because we've all had that experience. And yet the tower is proposed on a site that our zoning code doesn't permit it.
Right. It's my understanding that the code states that it will consider a wireless facility in a residential zone if we can prove that that is the only opportunity for our site. So as I showed you here, it's not our only opportunity, but it does provide us it's our optimal solution for this area to provide us that offload that we're looking for. We can achieve it with some of those other commercial properties, but it doesn't provide us the total solution that we're looking to achieve.
Thank you.
Richard?
You just said it's not your only opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
This provides the total solution.
Mm-hmm.
But it does just come back to an issue of cost. There are other ways, you said previously, of providing solutions that would be maybe a multiple approach to the solution. That comes down to cost. It will cost you more to provide the solution to your customers. That seems to me to be the essence of the argument tonight. You have one site in mind, which is a cheaper cost to your company, but in a residential area, and there are now multiple opportunities to solve that problem, but that would cost you more and require you to do different things. Is that a fair summation of your...
Well, I'd like to just kind of counter that. In most jurisdictions that we work with, they encourage us to look for opportunities where we can achieve the most with one site, as opposed to putting millions of sites in your area, not millions, but putting a large number of sites within your city. We are always encouraged to try to achieve our goal with the less amount of sites that we can. So that's what we're proposing here. So it's not necessarily a cost issue. We're not looking at it as a cost issue. What we're looking at is we're trying to achieve as much as we can with one site, as opposed to putting multiple sites in this small area.
Thank you.
Mario?
Yeah.
He was just relaxing.
It seems like there's a major valley that runs down 4th and 5th and 6th Avenue. Is that correct? When I'm looking at the red dots on the second to last, last page. It seems to run between Pico and a little bit south of Ocean Park. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And it seemed the natural way to handle that would be to try to use that very tall hotel that's on the corner of what would be 5th or 6th and Pico, and that would cover that whole area, that whole stripe.
Are you talking about the DoubleTree?
Not the DoubleTree. I'm talking about
It used to be a Sheraton, the Pink Hotel.
Yeah, you know the one I'm talking about. It's. Is there any objection to using a site that perhaps already has some of these cells by another mobile provider?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay.
To kind of go back to one of the other comments that they had about sharing sites, we do share locations with other carriers. We don't share the same equipment with other carriers, but we do what we call co-locating. Well, we will co-locate with other carriers. Sure. If they have an existing tower, we will co-locate with them on that. If they are, on a rooftop or a hotel, we'll look at opportunities to co-locate with them as well.
And let me ask you a question. If you have a choice between many small cells that are tightly overlapped versus one cell that's trying to round up everybody's kind of cell phone needs, why would you choose the big one, which is more prone? It has less redundancy, has less, let's say, surplus capacity than the same cells strung together, same quote-unquote smaller cells.
Right. So the reason why we're proposing the macro site versus the small cell, again, is to achieve that in-building performance that we're looking to achieve. We're looking to, that would be this red area along here. So that would provide us offload of that area here. With the small cell solution, it doesn't provide us that in-building. It won't provide us that offload of this in-building performance.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem that your macro solution is really covering more than half of that red valley that's there. It doesn't really do a good job, it seems. It's just a little bit kind of, it's a bridge too far for that particular cell structure.
Yeah, we're looking for something that achieves as much as we can.
Okay.
So that achieves both of those solutions as much as we can.
Thank you.
Let's go to our public hearing now. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. After the public hearing, you'll have an opportunity for rebuttal. Try not to forget. We have, from the public, we have Idel Musiek, David Wedelson, and Kathy Knight. Idel, please come up to the microphone. And then David, if you can be ready, and then Kathy.
Hello. Incidentally, I have T-Mobile, and it works great indoors and outdoors, so set apartment building. My name is Idel Musiek. I reside in apartment 307, directly above proposed cell towers. As an advanced cancer survivor living on the top floor, I'm very concerned about proposed construction of cell towers directly above my thin ceiling. Cell towers transmit hundreds to thousands more EMF radiation than cell phone Wi-Fi waves, especially when pinpointed in one location. Please comment on if there is a setback ordinance requiring cell towers to be built at a safe distance from schools. There is a school in Ocean Park in Lincoln, only a couple of blocks away. What is the Santa Monica distance limit? Other cities have established setback regulations regarding cell towers in schools. President Clinton released a memorandum stating transmitter masts should not be sited on schools or near residential areas. In 2010, President Obama's own cancer advisory panel identified the risk to children and adolescents from wireless radiation as the most pressing problem. If cell towers are risky for children in residential areas, isn't it obvious that they pose a risk for everyone within a setback ordinance? I'm concerned about accumulative radiation. I'm aware there are several towers within walking distance of our building, which includes Bob's Market at 17th and Ocean Park, Moose Lodge at 16th and Ocean Park. In addition, there is construction of 3 new towers at Lincoln and Pearl Street. Do you have studies that support the safety of adding more towers? Those should be provided to the public. What is the maximum amount of radiation that people can be safely exposed to within FCC guidelines? How often will you monitor the EMF radiation from the towers? Have impact studies been conducted? Will the tenants of the building be given the results of any EMF radiation monitoring results? Explain the safeguards for insulating against excessive radiation as produced by the cell towers. How strong are the EMF fields? How many microwatts per square meter is the radiation exposure? I understand that the side effects start at 3.4 to 6 microwatts per square meter. How much radiation will be emitted from the towers to our building and to my apartment right below it? The radiation pattern of a cell tower antenna includes people living within 50 to 1,500 feet radius. In the high radiation zone, they are more prone to ill effects from electromagnetic radiation. Our building incurred damage from the 1994 earthquake, and I think a thorough study needs to be done for the entire building, not just roof, before placing heavy equipment on our roof, which would include required retrofitting. Was the earthquake study done? Can we see results before going forward? To my knowledge, in the 30 years I have resided in this building, it has never been tented for termites, which could affect integrity of the structure of the roof and building. Do you monitor for telecommunications equipment locations for windstorms? And could a cell tower also affect the roof?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
David?
Yes. Hello, my name is David Swedelson. I'm legal counsel for the 1212 Ocean Park Homeowners Association, which is immediately adjacent to the apartment building that they're proposing to put the site on. We're uphill from the proposed site. I was here in October, and I heard the T-Mobile representatives then talking about how they were screening from view, and they were talking about it from the perspective of downslope, but not from my client's perspective, looking down on the roof. So my client, residents in the building, will be looking down on the equipment. I did, by the way, submit a letter in opposition, And I won't repeat everything in here except that going off on what Idell just said, we're concerned about the radio frequency and the cancer risk as well. We believe that environmental assessment is necessary because the radio frequency waves would go up to my client and the residents in my client's building. So we're concerned about that. And in the Planning Commission's report that I got today, it mentions that other than when the applicant was seeking a site for the facility, the appellant has not indicated that they have reached out to neighboring properties. I was here in October. I talked to those people. They've not reached out to us at all. They've not reached out to my client at all, which is interesting because my client is higher elevation. They never came to my client and said, hey, how about we put it on your building? That would avoid some of the radio frequency issues, would avoid some of the issues of how it would impact the neighborhood, so people wouldn't see it because it would be higher than most people would be able to see it. So for many reasons, we support the denial of the appeal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then we'll hear from Kathy Knight, Joe Ferris, and Melanie Wise.
How much time do we have? 3 minutes? Okay. My name is Kathy Knight, and I live across the street from, in the residential area where these 9 cell phone antennas and 3 cell phone towers would be put, a wireless communications facility. And we're totally shocked by this. 54 of us signed a petition. I hope you read it. It's in the file at the hearing on November 6th. Or we sent it to the zoning administrator then. Some of the reasons are that we continue to have these objections. The city code protects residential areas in Santa Monica from these antennas and cell phone towers and in the neighborhoods. And as it was said, no commercial antenna shall be located in a residential district, Santa Monica Code Section 9.32.060. And not only is it putting it in a residential district, but one of the reasons they say they wanted is to have a better reception in a commercial zone up by Olympic and the 110 freeway and the 405. I mean, this is like completely the opposite of what we're supposed to be having in Santa Monica. They're supposed to be put in the commercial zones and not in neighborhoods to support commercial zone coverage. I don't know why they didn't submit all this information before. That doesn't seem right to me. And also the apartment building there already exceeds the city zoning height limit by 5 feet. T-Mobile would be exceeding it even more. So it's already exceeded that. And property values and desirability decrease when located near a cell phone tower. We check with local realtors. I'm even considering selling my home if this would go in. I get scared. I really do get scared. And T-Mobile, anyway, we several, 2 people in the neighborhood have recovered from brain tumors, and they're really, really, really scared of this going in. And there's all this thing like, well, there's no proof that it causes anything like that. But you know, this could change in 10 years from now or 20 years from now, like things have changed in the past with DDT or Roundup and all these different things that come later on. It shows that there is a danger. So if there's any problem, any possibility at all, it should be denied. And I just ask you to support the staff's recommendation to deny this permit, and we strongly support that position. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Ferris.
My name is Joe Ferris. I've lived in the area for about 20 years, and I live close to the proposed installation. Reading from my letter that I sent to the planning commissioners, I wish to deny the appeal by T-Mobile, formerly represented by J5 Infrastructure Partners, to install 3 cell phone towers consisting of 9 antennas to be located on the roof of a large apartment building that looks down on my residential neighborhood in a residential zoning district. Since the applicant claims a gap in coverage in a commercial district some distance from the proposed location of said antennas, the least intrusive means is surely not in the middle of a residential area where I use my cell phone indoors, which operates at 3G's rate with no complaints, using T-Mobile from Consumer Cellular. Despite the FCC and the wireless industry wish that we remain ignorant of the damages to health due to electromagnetic energy from cell towers, is well documented, and further evidence of this is reflected in the way real estate values have been known to decrease significantly for real property located near cell towers. For the above reasons, I concur with Planning Division staff, who continues to recommend denial of this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Melanie Wise.
Good evening, and thank you for hearing us on this. My name is Melanie Wise. I live directly behind the building site where they're proposing this installation. I have spent years studying RF emanations. I used to work in satellite communications, and the standards by which we judge what is safe in this field are archaic at best. Those standards include, does it heat body temperature? That doesn't even get into the fact that these waves permeate our body. So for all of the reasons that you've already heard of, and for which I will not repeat because you've already heard them, I am opposed to this installation. The other thing is she keeps talking about offloading traffic, and my residential area is not your dump site for EMFs or for, people who literally are addicted to their cell phone. It's one of those where, yes, certain parts of nature do not support cell phone reception. That's just the way it is. There are sometimes I have to walk outside of my house to talk on the phone. I'm absolutely glad to do it. But I don't want a cell phone tower parked literally just above my head. There's an alley that separates me from the backside of that building, so there's going to be towers literally aimed across my house, across the street of these three people. So I am absolutely opposed to it, and it's one of those, we use cell phones blindly. We are Joe, as Joe said, the data is now starting to come forward, but if you really want to find it, you have to search on European websites to see where they have done explicit studies on cell phone and the dangers therein, and cell phone towers represent an extraordinary danger over an average cell phone. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Helen Stevenson is our last speaker. Helen?
Yes, my name is Helen Stevenson. I reside in apartment 306, which is on the third floor of the subject property, located at 1128 Ocean Park Boulevard. This is a 3-story apartment building consisting of 43 units. Well, this is kind of redundant, but the records reflect that the previous application by agents for T-Mobile was heard October 2017, denied November 2017 by the Santa Monica Zoning Administrator for the minor, for the minor use permit to allow wireless telecommunication equipment to be installed on our rooftop. In response to the appeal by T-Mobile for the minor use permit as indicated above, I continue to be concerned with the health risks of the proposed cell towers, antennas, equipment, and cabinets from EMF radiation, especially since I reside on the 3rd floor. I would like to know what modifications applicants have proposed. 1, to meet the requirements of the Santa Monica Zoning Administrator, and City Planning Commission in order to go forth with their project, and 2, also ensure there are no health risks to the tenants with their plan. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public hearing. Would you like it to take a minute for rebuttal?
I just wanted to make one comment. All of our facilities operate within the FCC guidelines. We make sure that they operate under those guidelines, and we have already submitted an emissions report with our application, and we are happy to submit another emissions report after the installation to show that everything is performing well. So if that's needed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A question?
Hello.
Ma'am?
I have a question. I want to make sure I heard you correctly when you testified before. You're saying that T-Mobile in this area does not have a significant gap in service. This is to do something else.
Correct. We are looking for capacity offload.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. Yes.
So now I'm looking at what our staff report says, and it does allow for this minor use permit to modify the regulations if topographical conditions obstruct or otherwise unreasonably interfere with effective transmission or reception of the type desired. I guess one of the challenges for me is like that I feel like the zoning code does create this opening for potentially justifying an antenna at the site, but I don't really see that justification presented in the appeal.
So the reason why we are proposing the facility where it's at is because if you look at Lincoln is at a much lower elevation than the area that we're looking to propose our facility at. So if we wanted to achieve what we're hoping to achieve, which is some offload along Lincoln as well as that residential area, we wouldn't be able to achieve it with the elevation issue. Because I do have this photo that I brought, which shows that elevation. This is Lincoln right here. So up Ocean Park, you can see that elevation, and then this was another photo that just shows that incline. So that would be our argument, that we wouldn't be able to cover as much of that area if we propose something down on Lincoln because of this elevation.
And the appeal talks about that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take a second look. Thank you.
I have one more question. What is the significance of the area that you pointed out of 3rd Street, Pearl, 17th Street, and Ashland?
What do you mean, what is the significance?
Well, is this, there's something going on there that isn't up to standards or whatever, and that's what this installation is meant to address?
It's addressing our high traffic in that area.
And that's the area? It's
Yes.
the residential area?
Yes.
And the commercial district?
Yes, correct.
But there's no gap there. It's just a traffic issue.
No, we have blanket coverage in that area where what we do is we have overloaded sites. So we're looking to offload that traffic.
I got it. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
All right. Nope, I think that is all the questions.
Thank you.
So that brings it to you guys, commissioners, and Richard will begin.
So I'd like to move a motion. I'd like to move that the Planning Commission deny the appeal, uphold the zoning administrator's denial by taking the following actions. Number 1, deny minor use permit 17 ENT 0045, and 2, adopt the statement of official action.
Second.
And the reason I do this is that I think this is the weakest appeal I've seen for a long time. This company has the most amount of data and most ability to analyse that data of almost anybody we know. They know at any given moment exactly how much customer usage there is across the system, the problems, the issues. We could go on. None of that is reflected in the material that's been handed to us. And it's very clear there is no gap in coverage. It's clear that they want to do something that's significantly cheap for them to get to their corporate end, rather than something that would benefit the City of Santa Monica or its residents here and that provides an alternative. And so ultimately I'm going to back the Planning Department and the Zoning Administrator on this. I've seen no reason to change what the original decision was. That's what an appeal is. You have to upset what the original decision was. And tonight we haven't heard that. We haven't seen it in the written material. The maps don't convince us. There isn't the data. And stunningly, very diplomatically, the consultant that the city uses, who on other occasions has come down and told us that you have to put a cell facility in because the Act requires it, has very clearly indicated this doesn't rise to any of those levels. So under those circumstances, I think we should take this decision and take it very quickly.
Anybody else?
I have nothing to add. He said it all.
Okay. Amy?
Yeah, I guess I just, and maybe Jim, you need to comment on this, right? I don't necessarily disagree with the motion, but it doesn't necessarily, I'm not feeling like the standard that we should be judging this by is the gap in coverage, right? Because the zoning code, to me, the zoning code seems to set a different standard that isn't about gap in coverage, right? Telecommunications Act is about gap in coverage. But this says unreasonably obstruct or otherwise unreasonably interfere with effective transmission or reception of the type desired, right? Like, to me, that seems like super loosey-goosey.
Mm-hmm. Right, so there's, and you're correct, the standard review that we presented in the staff report is you have a minor use permit, so there's minor use permit findings, and there's a precondition before you get to those findings in the telecommunications ordinance part of the code that talks about the presence of topographical conditions in nearby structures that unreasonably obstruct or interfere with effective wireless transmission. What we presented in the analysis is that we don't have any data to assess that there is something interfering with that transmission. And, further to that, then it moves on to, okay, we don't meet that, then, looking at the minor use permit findings and neighborhood compatibility, given that it's a prohibited antenna, antennas are prohibited in residential districts, if we are to overcome that and the Planning Commission wanted to approve a design modification to allow that in a residential district, then then that's that two-part test. Is there a gap in coverage? And secondly, is it the least intrusive means? And that, from staff's perspective, the least intrusive means aspect of this is very important, because for us to recommend something, it would mean that the residential area is the only place that's left. Like, that is what you need in order to provide service, and that's not the evidence that was presented to us. So that's the recommendation that you see in the report for denial.
Can I clarify though? So I guess I'm still not entirely understanding why the first criteria is a gap in coverage, because when I look at what it says in the zoning code, it doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't just talk about a gap in coverage.
Right. It's not that we're using the gap as the significant gap was not the first test. We're providing that information in the report because the recommendation is for denial, and courts have established that when a local jurisdiction is going to recommend,
right, you're justifying
denial, exactly.
Yes,
so we have to provide that additional information. But the first test is there a topographical condition?
Dr. Kramer looks like he wants to say something about that.
Please. Come say something.
Good evening again. This whole issue of significant gap is one that was addressed by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals back in 2005 in a case called Metro PCS, which is now owned by T-Mobile, by the way, versus City and County of San Francisco. And what the Ninth Circuit said is that, and this is almost a direct quote, a significant gap belies a bright line test. It is factually based on the evidence for the particular situation before you. So when you get to the point of significant gap, that has to be proven by facts. And again, the Ninth Circuit's very clear that you can't just have a bright line. This is why the code, which I helped write, has certain provisions in it that recognize the fact that we can't always tell what an applicant's going to come in with or what level of evidence. But the burden's on the applicant to make its prima facie case of a significant gap, which, as we know now, is not the case here. And then it turns to us as the city to determine whether what they are proposing is the least intrusive means to close the gap. even where there's a significant gap, if there is a less intrusive way to close the gap than a particular proposal, and it's available to them, for example, using the right-of-way, which they have a state right to use, then this is how we get to the discussion that you're having now. So, any questions on that?
No.
Thank you.
Amy?
No.
All right. Anything else to say?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Let's vote.
I would like to add one thing
Oh.
that given the scarceness of real data and kind of a confused motives here, my feeling is that not only is this not a good proposal for the city, but it's even a worse precedent that if everyone came in and said, oh, I can challenge the zoning administrator with weak data, virtually no data, and get the same green light that we gave them here potentially tonight, that would be a really bad situation to be in. So I think we have two missions here. One is to avoid creating problems in the future and to solve an immediate one right now.
All right, let's vote, please.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Fonda Bernardi?
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes.
Commissioner Lambert?
Yes.
Commissioner McKinnon?
Yes.
And Chair Fresco.
Yes. All right, thank you very much. That appeal was denied. And that brings us to the final item on our agenda. And that is a discussion on the Planning Commission retreat, including but not limited to scheduling and agenda topics for discussion.
Thank you.
So our retreat is March 17th. I'm so excited to see you all there. And Jason too. You're at home listening. I revised the agenda based on my notes from our last couple of short discussions about them. They've been pretty short, so this kind of honed in on exactly what people had said they wanted to discuss. It came out to 6 items, although that first one about the mission statement is just really a warm-up. So it's really 5 items.
Did you winnow down to 6?
I sent out an extra thing through Kyle.
Which one are we reviewing? Are we reviewing this one or this one? I've got it.
I'm
it's
looking
the
at the new one that you got today
Okay.
in your email that Kyle.
It says 2017.
It has the date on it, March 17th, 2018.
Okay.
That one says 2017 because that's when we
Well,
started.
this is great.
We were supposed to, no, that's the old one.
Where's the new one?
The new one says item 10A up in the upper right corner and
that's
is
the one I have,
titled
but there's
Planning
7
Commission
items.
Retreat
It's not
Agenda.
It's on your dais. It's right here.
Okay.
Okay. So, I think we're not going to have a facilitator, is that right?
Right, that's, I hadn't heard that as something as a desire of the
Can we get one
commission.
if we want one? It would be super cool to
strongly
get
recommend
one.
it.
I think that you can talk about whether you want to have one. We don't have a lot of time
Whose
between now
arm-
and then, and
Whose arm do we have to twist, David?
we can.
I just want to say that 2 hours is not a very long time, and the more facilitating we can have done, the better, because otherwise I think it's not going to be good without it.
I think we should try to get a 3-hour, for one thing, because the whole idea of the retreat is to have in-depth conversations and not rush and get through because everyone's getting really.
Chair,
There's not a room available anywhere for 3 hours, yes?
I wonder if we could just cut the agenda.
Well, I don't think so. I think everybody has, there's 7 of us and people seem to feel strongly about these.
Okay. I guess I would be comfortable cutting the agenda if
Yeah, me
we're
too.
trying to.
This is
What would you
absolutely
like
impossible.
to cut?
Everything except 7.
Where's 7?
Well, you're looking at the old agenda where lots of things have been cut.
Everything but 6.
Everything, but I think 6 is not a retreat issue, personally.
Meaning what? We should talk about it
There is-
here.
So basically, you don't want to have a retreat, is what you're saying.
No, there's another way to do this, which is we could agree to prioritize, and then as far as we get down on the list, that's where we get, and then we could have another retreat or schedule it in our normal meetings for those items that didn't make it for whatever reason through the particular retreat.
I really think that, you know, a chance to really talk about our business and our process and our policies is a really important thing to do as a group. So I don't agree with that.
And I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that it's not a good idea to have a retreat. I'm just saying that.
That thing is really important. I agree it's very important, and that's why.
There's no way we're going to cover all
No,
this.
I'm also just saying that those other things I'm not interested in talking about.
Well, what do we do, guys?
Well, can I chime in? I'm
Yes,
waiting to be.
please.
I want to be recognized. Thank you. One of my items was staff report efficiency. The top for the reason why I put that on the agenda and others agreed for the retreat is because I've found that over time, sometimes our agendas are redundant. Sometimes there are everything from grammatical errors that make facts confusing, and since this is, you know, these are like the nitty-gritty details matter, I thought it might be important to kind of get some buy-in on how we might make them better for everyone, and I would point out some things that I found were really great and some things that were lacking, but I'd be willing to bump that down to the bottom if you wanted to do a prioritization method or save it for a night where we have an hour's worth of meeting and we could discuss it at the end. Like I said, it was my item, and I've been taking notes, and I could do it either at the retreat or another time. So I'll leave that to the commission. If I personally would like to see the retreat last 3 hours. I think 2 hours, you know, we might start at 10 after, and then after, you know, the conversation, if we're not having a moderator, we might get long-winded. Look, I'm a good example of it, right? I would say 3 hours to me. To me, 3 hours seems reasonable. 2 hours seems a little bit short. So I would advocate for the 3 hour time frame, but even be willing to say, hey, I'm willing to take this item off the table, but we'll come back to it another time. But I think everything else is really important, and I think that the Housing Accountability Act is important. I don't know, maybe that's something we could talk about another time, but if we keep it on the retreat agenda, I talked about this with Leslie earlier, because there's something going on downtown tomorrow regarding the Housing Accountability Act, and it's really interesting to me, and I do want to discuss it with the commission. So at the retreat would be great, but if we have to, you know, but I don't know. But number 2 is really important to me. 2 and 3 and 5 seem extremely important, and I really just don't see us plowing through that in 2 hours. I don't know. 2 hours just seems like a feeble effort. We've been talking about doing this for a while.
Since last summer.
Since last summer, and I don't know. I kind of feel like we could make it last a really, really long time. I don't want to see it go up more than 3 hours on that particular day because I personally have other things that I have to do that day. But I think 3 hours is extremely reasonable.
I think, go ahead.
So I can't recall discussing the retreat before me personally, so you must have gone ahead and done it. I have 2 issues. For some reason I thought it was March the 10th, and so there's a major conflict there. But second, there is a more fundamental issue that I want to raise, and that is stretching back many, many years. I believe that bodies such as this, school board was the one that I spent a lot of time on, should do their business not just in public, but as much as possible in the full glare of public attention. So one of the great features about the Planning Commission is we can only see 3 people in the room. What we can't see is the, as it turns out, hundreds or thousands of other people out there who, for whatever reason, turn in at all sorts of odd hours to check out what we're talking about. And as a Planning Commission, I do believe that we have a higher responsibility even than the City Council, because so much of what we do has an impact on everyone's property and where they live and how they live and the dynamics of it. And so much of the City Council is moved through fairly rapidly. But therefore, I'm always of the persuasion that we should be sitting here discussing issues with the television on and people able to see how we reach our decisions. Now, we will be in public because the retreat is a public operation, but it's not the same as people having the ability to turn a television on and watch what we do. But, I feel that this is a better place for discussions, and particularly the Housing Accountability Act. I've got increasingly more concerned that we would do it away from public attention here. This is a place of authority. Anywhere else will be a whole other different feel. My 2 cents worth on that.
Can we do it here?
Where were we going to do it?
We were looking at different venues. At the moment, we have the multi-purpose room at the library held, but we were looking at other potential options as well, because I think that's what we heard. There was an interest in not being in City Hall. So,
trying to be a people pleaser here.
Can I say something?
Well, I may be a one-off, but
Mario's
it's certainly a
been waiting.
very strong feeling that I have about the way we need to operate and how difficult it is. So you make your decisions and we'll see how it goes.
Mario?
Yeah, I think because it's taken a long time to herd all these cats, I think the 3 hours is probably my number one thing, giving us enough time to get as far through the agenda as possible. And I think that should not exclude, obviously, the public visibility. And that's all I want to say.
Okay.
I think that wherever we go, I've been to a lot of retreats, and they're usually in a comfortable setting because you are comfortable and you're more free-flowing and you know what have you, which this is not. But wherever we go, there should be adequate space for the public, and it should be televised, which is my understanding is what's going to happen. I have no problem talking about the Housing Accountability Act. I think that that could easily be done during a planning commission meeting if you set aside a half an hour or 45 minutes. It is what it is. And if you read it and you read staff's input, it's pretty clear what the Housing Accountability Act is. If we don't like it, then we change the law.
Since we're talking about this, I'm going to take this moment to say that I see something on this semi-finalized agenda that I'm sorry, there's something missing from the finalized agenda, and I don't necessarily see it in the draft agenda, but I'll just say at some point during our numerous discussions on what we would discuss, I raised the topic, and I think along with Commissioner Perry, the idea of talking out with staff, the idea, a way to kind of get progress reports on what I said was projects. Now, I see on the draft agenda it says big picture progress reports, and it says receive and discuss progress reports on implementation of loose mobility, Vision Zero, etc. But the item that I brought forward was similar to that, but wasn't exactly that. It was more like that we would perhaps find time in future agendas and going forward, make it a general practice to talk about the life. This is a good way of saying it. The life cycle of a development.
That is on here, actually.
It is? Oh my gosh.
Under annual review, the thing that staff had on in our last discussions, we realized, of course, that we get reports on Vision Zero and all that kind of stuff. So this says developing a framework. So we're not going to get the report. We're just going to say what we would like the report to include, and decide how often we want to get it from planning staff. And it would include things like outcomes from past projects, like did they die, did they get built, what did they look like? I mean, I thought that's what you were looking for.
Yes.
So we're not going to go through all the projects.
Oh no, no. If I said that, I misspoke. I definitely did not mean that we were going to do that at the thing. It was to discuss how we were going to get this life cycle information presented to us. And so I see. I misread that annual review, and I see what you're saying, and I'm glad to see that on there. I did not fully understand that item. Thank you.
Can we just clarify that agenda item, because and from what I'm hearing, and I had notes from our last discussion, and I thought what I'm remembering is for this one was that at the last time you discussed this idea of a progress report could be something that could be on agendas that commissioners can ask questions about things you're interested in, as opposed to an annual report. An annual report takes a lot of work, We don't do annual reports for development typically, other than DA
I didn't
monitoring.
mean to use a technical term.
Yeah, so I think
Report
that
every now and then.
I think if-
intermittent report, is that a technical term?
I think we just call it reporting or something. I just
Okay.
want to make sure there's an accurate understanding of what this agenda item might be,
I-
because
that-
I just
yeah.
don't think it's practical in terms of an annual report or some kind.
Right, but
So-
the whole point of it being on the retreat agenda is so we can discuss what's practical and what we want to fear and how we can do it so that it works.
Why not just
Understood.
include it-
It's again just providing the broadest
Okay.
ability to discuss.
Couldn't you like elaborate on what Jennifer's talking about in the pipeline report?
I
Well,
think that's
if
part
I-
of your discussion, and I
Well,
mean we
alright.
can. That's why it's on the
As
agenda.
someone who initiated the item, I think that the word annual that wasn't necessarily part of my original plan, and I do see how like an annual report or something like that might be laborious, although it sounds really great, but might not be the right way to go. Maybe it's something that would come naturally over time. I mean, on the one hand, I say you could probably tell me the life cycle of project A, B, or C and the steps that it took and whatever, and it might not take you that long on something. Maybe it would. So to put it in writing shouldn't even be that difficult if you could do it off of the top of your head. But that's stuff that we don't necessarily see. It's years and years and years. Like I live near a project that's getting built now. It was, went through the planning commission 7 years ago. It's different. These are just things. There's dots. I mean, when the planning commission can learn, hey, this is what happened after it left you, and here's how it's getting built and everything, then it enables us to say, hey, that action that we took, meaningless, or that really has an impact, or this was really helpful, but here's how we need to tweak it. And in a way, it's kind of like blowing on one of those little dandelions that goes, and the project just goes off into the wind, each little particle, and I think bringing it back around doesn't have to be an annual thing, but
Right.
more of a regular thing.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's something we could certainly discuss at the retreat. It'd probably be more appropriate or in some ways easier to do that in response to an inquiry about a specific project. So if a project has gone through the process, it's been completed, and the commission would like a report on how it turned out, I think that's something we could put together on a project by project basis. I think it would be harder to kind of assemble a report that deals with multiple projects.
Well,
So I think we could discuss it more, but I think it depends on what you're looking for.
I'm glad that you know clearly what I was intending with the agenda item. I'm glad to hear that it will be discussed further at the retreat, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Chair,
Yes.
can I share an idea?
Yes.
So to me, it sounds like, I think I'm kind of sensing from everybody that folks would be more comfortable maybe doing like I don't know what we're calling it for the council, but like maybe a study session on the Housing Accountability Act, like that we have a discussion about the Housing Accountability Act here during a regular meeting, right? Because I think that that's a nice, right? I guess the public's going to get that with the council meeting, but I think it would be really helpful for the community to better understand the Housing Accountability
Well,
Act. and not
there's
just
more. What's going to the council is like an update on state housing legislation, and I think that would be useful for us to know as well beyond the Housing Accountability Act. So, yeah, I think you're right. A study session on housing law would be really a good idea.
And my other thought was, so for the other 5 items, maybe for the retreat, we parse out the time, right? And maybe it's not even across those. And we're just, we're strict about trying to stay within the time frame at the retreat for each of these topics. And ideally, we kind of wrap them up in that time frame. But if we don't, then I don't know. Maybe they come back here and get wrapped up. I don't know. But because I think that'll help us to just get through.
Putting a schedule on will help everybody restrain themselves, and we can. I think that doing a little prep. That was another thing I was gonna say is that maybe there's some sort of, like preparatory thing that we all come with, or some people like Jennifer, maybe she says she has lists of things about staff reports or something. I have certain things about when I go through staff reports where I have to have 7 sticky notes so I can go back and forth between things that I wish were next to each other. Things like that we could be prepared and So, you know, it's a question of, do we want, I mean, maybe I could even work on things with Jing, or, you know, or I could work on it with you.
I was just going
or-
to say, I just want to say this again. I think you already know this about me, but I'm willing to have the retreat. I'm willing to have it be non-structured. I'm willing to have it last as long as it can. That's not my thing. But, I mean, shortening it and going, oh my gosh, we got to speed this up is not my thing. But if you would like to, with me, work on, if it's something that we can say here at this time, if you would like to work on the staff report issue with me, I'd be happy to approach staff with it, and then we can report out. I have a list of things. Maybe it's just an hour meeting with staff, and we can say these might help, and we can report out at a meeting. Chair, I'm just proposing that. It's up to you, and it would take an item off of our agenda at the retreat.
We could certainly, you know, I think ironing things out ahead of time. I mean, one of the items that used to be on here that's gone was the idea of a subcommittee and having subcommittees, because I've never seen this commission do that, so I had put that on there. But maybe we're just going to make a subcommittee. Are we allowed to do that?
You don't call them subcommittees.
Commissioner Kennedy, can I clarify? So you're kind of saying maybe we pull item 4 off, and you and the chair.
That wasn't actually what I was suggesting.
Okay.
I was suggesting it, but the chair is going to help us decide this evening. But that's what I mean. And that's fine. I was proposing that, but of course, I'll prepare for the meeting and I'll bring my notes or whatever. I don't see it as personally. I don't see it as one of the longer items. So if the chair wanted to do it instead of at the retreat in another way, in a less formal, I'm happy to hear that the chair has these issues too, and I feel like we're going to get them resolved. Like, I'm actually feeling really hopeful. How we go about it, to me, doesn't matter as much. But if you want to do it in a more personal setting with staff and as a
I would support the
technical,
idea of you guys
then that's fine.
doing a subcommittee or just sharing directly with staff.
Right. Well, what I was thinking of was preparing, you know, like this idea of topics. We can create a starter list with, you know, and just create, you know, do a little pre-brainstorming and bring bullet points on some of these things to kind of get things going, and that will make it go faster and more efficiently.
I think the problem is if we bring it up at the retreat, as you're proposing, it will go off into a lot of talk. You talk about the staff reports?
Yeah,
If you come to the retreat with bullet points, trust me, we'll be talking about it for a half an hour.
What I'm trying to get is, and I don't know, Chair, if this is your goal, but I like the idea of doing it at the retreat, but I also want to just say why I like the idea of doing it perhaps with you, Chairperson, and the staff, is because my desire is really to get staff buy-in. I want staff to go, hey, you know what? That's a great idea. I didn't realize that was redundant in there 70,000 times. Or I didn't know that's how the planning commissioners are reading it. Or this is something this really super important piece of information is always on page 20 when it could be on page 1. Or there's this was the most helpful piece of the staff report.
We're going into detail here.
All I'm trying to do is, so for me, if all the planning commissioners go, hey, you know what, these improvements really, really help my productivity, great. But we're never going to realize it unless we have some staff buy-in. I'm going like, if I can have a meeting with the chairperson and staff, I feel like I can make some change.
Can I just suggest that, if there are, you're well, I think I just want to say that if you ever have suggestions, just tell us and we'll make them. Like, I don't think, really, just.
But, the idea was to give them organized.
What's that?
The idea of doing it in the retreat was for us all to agree and organize the.
Yeah. I just wanted to offer that, though, if there's ever, it sounds like you have concerns, and obviously I'd love to know what those are. And
Chair, could we just leave it to you and Commissioner Kennedy to go move ahead and then send out the agenda and let's move forward? Otherwise we're having the retreat now.
Exactly. Right. So the idea here is basically that the commission appears to agree that the Housing Accountability Act discussion should be a special study session here in the chambers and not at the retreat.
Well, I think it should be broadened to housing legislation and housing laws that impact our activities.
Well, when we talk about item 2, we can clarify that at the
and flow
retreat.
charts too.
No, they're doing this for the city council. They should do it for us.
No flow chart, no discussion.
You were going to do it for us. You weren't going to make us.
But we may want to discuss. We may want to understand what it says, and that would mean a meeting.
Right, so just to clarify, we're not making a presentation to council unless they ask. It's a written info item.
Oh, okay.
And we'd be happy to, obviously when it's public, we'll give it to the commission, and then we can agendize a study session for us to present and talk about it. I did want to go back to the purpose, like the original agenda item that was on here, and I think it was at Susan's suggestion, was to talk about legal background, like the framework of findings for permits in general. I think that was something we had heard from the commission in general when we looked at like CUPs and DRs and requirements, evidence to support findings, that sort of thing. I don't know if you feel like that's a helpful retreat item, because it's a more broad-based applicability.
Yeah, as I recall, it was Commissioner Perry who raised that issue about trying to understand when findings are required and to what extent. And this is up to you. I mean, you've done this for so long. I'm sure you have an excellent idea of the findings, but I think from my perspective, what I'm seeing lately is sort of some of the decisions are lumped together as an approval of the project. And so I just want to make it clear on the record that if there are separate actions that are required in order to approve the project, that we just make it clear on the record the findings associated with each of those actions. And some of the times it's in the statement of official action, and therefore when you approve the project, there's an implied approval of all of those findings separately, but sometimes there's occasion on the record where it would be helpful if you would clarify if there's a variance you're considering, for example, just to make clear that what findings you think you can make or you can't make on the record as part of that discussion. And then at the end, when you adopt the STOA, that's fine. But I think it would be helpful to sort of separate out what your objections are or your support is and how that relates to the specific findings relating to the specific discretionary action. And it's more important for the Housing Accountability Act for the reasons which I tried to discuss and do this flow chart, which you will all get. But basically, it's to just understand the process that you have to, because the Housing Accountability Act assumes that the findings must be made when everything is, when you have objective criteria that are satisfied. And so how you get to that objective criteria is what I was concerned about, just sort of establishing the record. So that's something we can talk about at here at a session.
It sounded like that was that might be part of number 2, which was commission education.
Right. To the extent that you have any questions, I mean, you've done this for a while, so I think you have a good understanding of what you need to do. But to the extent you have any questions,
So do you want that to be an item at the retreat instead of Housing Accountability Act, which we're moving to chambers?
Well, it sounds like what she was just saying is just one portion that was going to fall under.
Educating us, that's developing topics.
Oh, you mean her findings?
2 is commission
I don't know that
education
it
or
actually
public
would be enough for a
what she's
topic
saying.
discussion.
This is Susan. This is the city attorney.
But,
me.
yeah, no, I was saying, sorry.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I was just saying that the discussion that you were proposing about findings that you just described to us is not at all the same as number 2 on this agenda. It's not on here, so we have to decide if we want it on here.
Develop a list of topics for a program.
Well, we
But
were just,
maybe-
I took an item off.
Maybe it. I mean, it sounds like it ties to the Housing Accountability Act, so maybe that would be an appropriate time to. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's not different. I'm just saying it ties to, right. So we could cover those 2 topics in a study session.
But it'll be a 3-hour study session.
Well-
Is that okay with you? I mean, it starts to.
I don't know. I don't know why it would be 3 hours, but and maybe it will be 3 hours. But
because
we have 3-hour meetings all the time, so why not?
But we're currently at half an hour discussing the retreat. So
well, I do recall Commissioner Parry bringing that issue up, and so I think it's unfortunate that he's not here to speak for himself. But I think that we were proceeding. Yeah. So if you're watching, you learned your lesson.
Text one of us.
But the bottom line is this: is that we've made it this far, and now we have a draft agenda. I do believe that, in fact, we are all calling it different things, but I kind of remember maybe possibly getting lumped onto just this like commissioner education kind of a thing, which that's why when I saw this bolded here, I was like, oh, commissioner education, of course we've been doing this a long time, but refreshers and like pointers and things go amiss. I mean, the people presented public information tonight that nobody had the opportunity to see, but they expected us to consider it. So there are things that a refresher is great. And so I'm saying the Commissioner Parry's idea should be something that we do at the.
It might be helpful to me to give me some direction so that we don't, that we are focused. If you give me some questions that you would like me to address, you can just send me an email.
Just email. We can do that.
Okay. At this point, I'm completely confused.
Well, that's good.
I have no idea what we're going to be discussing, but Jing probably knows.
I think it's
and
all
it'll
here.
be
I think
fun.
you did a great job. I actually think this is really I mean,
Can I
was
can I
confused about
can I
some-
beg one thing though? Can we take staff report efficiency off? Can you guys
It's
just
going to be a really. I think we should talk about it. What if we say something and then you're like, oh shit, I really need
Nothing
it.
is
because I don't care that much.
Okay.
I don't care either.
Wow.
My items are more maybe just technical to make us more productive and aren't super different, so it might
fine.
work in a smaller setting.
Okay. Fine.
So can I just confirm to make sure that we have the right, so we have the review and discussion mission statement, the commission public education topics, interactions with other city commissions, and then number 4, kind of like a project life cycle review or something. We'll think of a better title, but I think I understand the gist of it. Not at the retreat.
No, that
You guys are doing.
we're going to decide what
We're
it's
gonna
going to be.
right,
at the
exactly,
retreat.
exactly, right.
Well,
So I
then-
have 4 topics at this point. That's correct.
What about annual review?
And then, so are we? But we and Susan will educate us on something, but I'm not sure what anymore.
Right, I think I think it's direction on
Process.
Yeah.
Approvals. Questions, legal questions regarding processing of approvals. And it's your opportunity to ask whatever questions you want to ask.
So we'll just have an open item there that's
to,
all encompassing.
to get
Right.
us going in that, I would suggest that when you sit there and look at this group and how we function, and you're starting to tear out your hair and the purple smoke's coming out,
Yeah.
and there they go on that thin ice
Yeah.
again, that's what you should be telling us about.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
you obviously are too polite to tell us when we're doing it.
Yeah,
This is
Barry
what-
used
Well,
to turn
that's-
red when we did that.
Yes. So just
Actually, I think you guys are doing a pretty good job. Honestly, I think the only issues that have come up recently have to do with the Housing Accountability Act and just making things clear on the record, and then just clarifying the change in the standard of review between the new Housing Accountability Act provisions and the prior ones, which is substantial evidence, and now it's preponderance of the evidence. So that's
well, that
really
would be an
the-
important thing for us
right.
to
That's an
understand.
important topic of
think so.
discussion.
Even those 2 words
Right.
make a big difference, and we don't clearly see that.
Right.
Outside.
So we have 5 then.
All right. So I think.
Can we get 3 hours? Is that
Can we get 3 hours?
Yes, absolutely. We can, if that's what the
I would say we
commission desires, then we can look at a venue.
9 to 12.
10
We
to
can-
1.
If there's a majority interest from the commission to, and again, you can discuss this about the time, we will find a venue and a place that can accommodate what you want to do.
So it has to be 10 to 1 because the TV people need to set up? Is that what you're saying,
If we're at the library, but I don't think we have the room till 12:30, right? Right.
Okay.
Food and coffee. Would you like us to respond to the ideas of 10 to 1? I think 10 to 1 works.
I prefer 10 to 1. I hate going.
10 to 1 is good, but
I prefer 10 to 12.
Okay. Well, we're going to have such good food that you'll stay.
Right, well,
All right.
So 10 to 1. Okay, we'll find a
Okay. Beautiful. Okay, that wraps it up.
and facilitator.
Are there any future agenda items? Or no written communications?
Oh, I have a question though.
Yeah.
Was there an ARB meeting last night that there was anything important that we need to know about at it?
So I did represent the Commission at the ARB last night, and probably the nicest single thing ever sitting on this dais for the last 8 years happened. I was not aware of what the projects were, but the applicant came up and presented a project, one of the major sites. I asked the applicant designer, the architect, whether that was the best building and best project that he could possibly come up. And Mr. Gehry did say to me, "What would you like me to do?" So I thought that was very generous of him, even considering that we would have something to add to his knowledge. But the ARB did endorse it unanimously last night, so that will be floating towards us pretty shortly.
Beautiful.
So there we go. And Mario, you've never asked for my advice on a building, but there we go. Yeah, but now you know I'm available for that.
Okay.
Frank and me,
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.